I told myself I'd never play this game again. Yet, here I am, 3 weeks later.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Hi, my name is Barrelwave, and in this video, we're going to be talking about whether or not you should return to Destiny 2. So, I've been playing Destiny since the vanilla days of D1. I played this game so damn much, it's like ridiculous. I pretty much had no life. And I also bought D1, I think 2 or 3 times technically. I don't remember. I know the Taken King, I bought the box set for that, so I know for sure I bought the game twice at least. And I practically lived and breathed this game. But unfortunately, all of that changed when D2 came around. Now, when Destiny 2 came out, at first the game was pretty good. Like, people seemed to enjoy it. Everyone was happy, rainbows and butterflies, whatever. But for whatever reason, not long after the game came out, everything turned sour, and like a lot of players started to get fed up and started leaving the game. And I was one of those players. I know on my behalf, I can say that the content kind of became stale and just there wasn't enough to do. For me, I was pretty frustrated with how sweaty PvP was too, and it felt like the game was focused way too heavily on the PvP aspect and not enough on the PvE aspect. Now, my memory could be wrong, but that's just how I remember the game personally. I know the last thing I did, I'm pretty sure, was the Leviathan raid, and once I finished that, I was pretty much just done. I was over it. There was nothing more for me to do. I stopped playing for like a year, I think maybe even more, but from what I understand, it was at least a full year that I didn't play this game. And then all of a sudden, I was being told by a bunch of friends and people I would play with in the past that the game's changed. It's different, man. You gotta come back. It's completely different. It's so much better now, and they fixed it, and blah 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 blah. But I just refused to budge and give in and give the game another try. I just didn't want to be disappointed again. Honestly, I was afraid of being disappointed, and I just refused for the longest. I don't know how long it was for, but I know it was for a while. I was just like, nah, fam, nah. And then one day, I finally just gave in, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll give it a shot. So I dropped the $50 to get both the DLCs, and that was 3 weeks ago. And these are my thoughts. So I'm not going to go over every single aspect of the game, but I am going to touch bases on a couple of pretty big topics that I feel should be mentioned, and one of them being the story. Now, I know the game is not exactly known for like being the greatest story ever told or anything like that, even though it is from the makers who made Halo, so they should be able to make a good story. But I beg to differ. So I'm going to start off by talking about Forsaken, since that was technically the first DLC that came out ever since I left. I gotta admit, Forsaken actually is my favorite of the 2 DLCs, only by a smidge though. It's not that great. It still has the same typical Destiny story issue of being just kind of like whatever, and just like kind of feeling like it's just thrown in there just to have a story campaign to please like those types of players. So here are some good things I thought about the DLC. For starters, your character finally has a voice, which is cool. It only took them like a fucking millennium to get your character to have a voice, but it's whatever. It's whatever. He only has a couple of lines though, but I mean, hey, he finally has a voice, so that's cool. And that's something that I personally have always disliked about the game, because I felt like I didn't really matter. I was just kind of there, even though the whole game is meant to make you feel like you're important. And you do feel important, but not having a voice kind of damages that for me. I did appreciate the slightly bold, move they made by like killing off Cayde 6. Although it didn't really feel all that impactful or important or even necessary, it was still cool that they tried something like that. That was kind of, like I said, a bold move to do. Another part of the story I thought was pretty cool was the last chunk of the story where you're supposed to hunt down the dudes who had a part of Cayde's killing. And some of the missions specifically, like two of them. The rest of them were kind of tedious, honestly, but there was two of them that I felt were kind of cool. One of them was only cool to me because it was hilarious, and it was the Rider mission, because as you're fighting the Rider or the boss in the end of the mission, they're doing this like hilarious sounding like maniacal evil villain laugh as they're riding their the pike, and I thought that was pretty funny. Another mission I want to touch bases on is actually the last mission, of course. Naturally, it's pretty hectic, and it has a very weird ending that I'm not too sure how I feel on, but it is what it is. All in all, I thought the story was okay. Nothing special, but it was okay. It's better than, stories they've done in the past. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the next DLC, which is Shadowkeep. Unfortunately, I didn't bother to do any gameplay capture of the Shadowkeep DLC, so I apologize for that. But moving on, this one wasn't as good as Forsaken, but it was still pretty cool. Destiny, like I said, isn't known for their stories, but they do tend to do something that's kind of interesting. It's just they don't tend to go anywhere with it. But the only thing I really liked about the Shadowkeep DLC, honestly, for the story, of course, is just the last mission. The last missions of any Destiny story tend to be pretty cool because they're very hectic, and I like that. Sometimes it could be a little challenging, but they've got to do something to spice it up and keep it interesting. Another thing that was kind of interesting was the ending, actually, overall of the story. I don't really know what to think of it, but I'm excited to see what that unfolds to, if it goes anywhere in the future. Another thing I thought that was pretty cool was the callbacks to previous raid bosses and like main villains of like the first game, and even of course Destiny 2. Specifically the part where you do the Crota raid and you have to do the whole sword bearer thing and like smash Crota with it. That part I was in so much awe and was so happy when that came on. I got so excited and it was so much fun. But at the same time, as much as I did appreciate them kind of referencing old bosses, the whole last mission and the whole, honestly, DLC kind of felt just like a rehash of old missions and fighting old bosses, which was kind of a problem to me and felt a little lazy on Bungie's part, but I mean, it was still cool. I have to admit, it was still cool, but it did feel a little lazy and like uncreative. So unfortunately, there's that. All right, so now I want to talk about some of the activities that are brand new to the game, and specifically brand new to me, of course. If you stopped playing the game around the same time I did, which is around like the Leviathan raid, then these should be brand new to you as well. So first I want to talk about an activity that's located on the moon called the Altars of Sorrow. And what your objective is that you're supposed to stop these yellow bar enemies from getting from one point to the other before time runs out. And if you do this successfully, you then get to progress to the next tier of the activity, and you do this about 5 or 6 times. It could be more, I can't remember off the top of my head. And then you're met with a mini boss, and the objective is to pretty much kill these side enemies that give it an immunity, and then you can just DPS the hell out of the boss until he's gone. But while you're doing this, also there's like a swarms of enemies also attacking everybody. So it's a pretty big activity that requires at least a fire team to get it done properly. But if you're lucky, you can have your fire team, or even if it's just you can get like upwards of like 10 different guardians playing the activity with you, and that's when this activity gets especially fun, because then everything gets real hectic, and there's bombs and grenade launchers and ammo flying all over the place, and it's just super fun. I love it. Next, I want to talk about an activity called the Pit of Heresy, which is something that requires the actual story of the Shadowkeep DLC to be done and purchased. So if you don't have that, unfortunately, I don't believe you can do this activity. But nonetheless, this activity is cool because it's essentially just a miniature raid. So you have a 3-man fire team, and you go through essentially a bunch of corridors of boss battles with certain objectives you have to do damage to the boss. Once you finish the boss, then you make your way to the next encounter, and where you're given another and new set of parameters in which you can damage the boss, or a new objective as well. Once you beat the entire activity, you are then gifted with what's called a piece of pinnacle gear, which is essentially just something that's going to be a higher light level than whatever you have in your inventory at the time. It could be a weapon or even a piece of armor, of course. So next I want to talk about my personal favorite activity in the game, and that's an activity called Gambit. So essentially, this one is pretty straightforward. It's just two fire teams going against each other to see who can beat a boss faster than the other, in a nutshell. To get more into detail, all you do is you kill enemies and they drop points, which you then collect, and you bank those points. And depending on how many points you bank, you can send an enemy to the other team's bank of points to slow them down and even stop them from banking points until they kill that enemy. And they can do the same to you, of course. And you also eventually get the option to invade the other fire team's game and kill players to even further slow them down from getting the boss summoned before you do. Once the boss is summoned, then it's up to you and your fire team to DPS the hell out of him to kill him as fast as you guys possibly can. Then you also have a mode called Gambit Prime, which is just Gambit, but instead of it being 4 rounds, which equals a game, 1 round is 1 game. I love the Gambit game mode because it's just a mixture of PvP and PvE. It's not just a sweat fest of Crucible where it's just pure PvP, Guardian versus Guardian. The next thing I think is worth talking about is another activity called Forges. And the best way I can explain how Forges work is it's kind of sort of loosely like a game of basketball. So the objective is you have to kill enemies and they drop these balls, and it's up to you to pick up the ball and throw it at this thing in the sky and hit it in a specific spot, and that's how you score points. Once you score enough points, you then progress onto another round of the same thing of scoring enough points, but then it spawns a little bit more enemies and it gets more hectic. Then once you do that, you get enough points to spawn the boss, and then it spawns more enemies and you have to take care of the boss as fast as you can by DPSing the hell out of him, just like in all the other game modes. Aside from those game modes and activities, you have your typical raids and strikes and Crucible, of course. But those were the only ones I felt were worth mentioning and were also brand new to the game. Alright, so now the question is, should you play Destiny 2? And the answer is yes. You should at least give it a try. I really do think the game is worth coming back to and giving a second chance to if you've left the game like I did. If you're brand new to the game, the answer is still yes, and I think you should still give it a try, because it is fun now. Between the story and the extra side missions and the exotic quests and the daily bounties, there's a lot to do in this game now, and it's all honestly pretty fun. I must admit, it's a little jarring almost for me to be saying and recommending people to come play this game and come back to it, because like I said in the beginning, I was very much against this game, and I was like, no, that game can eat shit. But, you know, they pulled through and made the game pretty fun. And it's worth sticking around to see what the future holds for the game. Obviously, whenever the next DLC comes out, this could all be pointless and change. But as of right now, like I said, for the 3rd time or however many times now, the game, yes, is worth coming back to. If you enjoyed this video or if you found it helpful and it convinced you to actually give the game a try, then go ahead and please give it a like and share. And if you'd like, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.